Story time. This is fun. I'm actually starting to really enjoy this. I must admit that for me, social media or putting myself out there is not something that comes easily. But I am enjoying reading these stories, um, and I hope you are too. Values. Okay. So here's the image in the book. You're probably seeing it backwards. You can download it from the member site of my website. And here's the story. One of my early jobs was working for a large sports association. I was hired as a project manager in the Department of Information Technology. Yes, hard to believe, but on the 1st of July 1995, I walked into the office for my first day on the job. I had been forewarned that my boss would be on vacation until mid-July. So his boss met me at the door. He immediately told me that the receptionist was ill and that he would highly appreciate it if I could jump in and take her place for 2 or 3 days. While I was rather annoyed to be demoted within 5 minutes on my very first day, because I was not hired to be a receptionist, I didn't feel like I was in a position of choice, so I did reluctantly agree. After some really quick instructions on how to use the switchboard, I was left on my own. Within a few minutes, the phone rang. The phone started to ring. It wasn't an ordinary phone. There were many more buttons than I was used to, and I had no idea what they were for. I picked up the receiver. A mumbled voice asked to speak to someone who apparently worked in this office of close to 100 employees. Suddenly it hit me. I was going to have to understand the name of the people that I had never heard of, pretend I knew who they were talking about, find their number, hoping I'd understood the name correctly, figure out how to transfer the call, and then announce the person who was calling, hoping I got their name right as well. There were way too many variables for me to get wrong, and that was if the person actually picked up who I was, trying to transfer the call to. If they didn't, things got even more complicated. My stress levels immediately peaked. I don't know how I made it through that day, but my respect for receptionists grew immensely in those 8 hours. The next morning, I went into the office of my boss's boss, and I told him I would not cover the reception anymore. It was the first time I'd stood my ground, more out of necessity than actual courage, but it felt good to stand up for myself. Nevertheless, I was nervous for the next 2 weeks, waiting for my direct boss to come back from vacation to potentially get an earful from a superior. The thought crossed my mind that I might even lose my job. When he finally came back from his holiday, I decided to tell him directly what had happened. He simply shook his head, took a deep sigh, and apologized on his boss's behalf. That moment, I knew the two of us would get along just fine. Our North Stars were aligned. He was the best boss I ever had. It is so easy to fall into the trap of following somebody else's values. And society, our upbringing, we come into the world in a family, in a system. First, the small system, the family unit, and then the school, and then, the system becomes bigger and bigger. And there are expectations within each system to adapt to their values, to live life by their values. And while we might adopt and truly believe that those values correspond to ours, Some of them don't. For me, in that moment, that this guy, just because he was in a superior position, was stuck with the fact that his receptionist was ill, knew that I spoke 3 languages. I was a woman at the time. That did make a difference because there were other events that happened. You know, within that first couple of months working there, for example, putting me in a book with the title of a secretary just because I was the only woman in the department. I was not formed to be a secretary. I had no knowledge of administrative work in that sense or how to assist someone. I was a project manager. I was an IT specialist. But because I was a woman and somebody needed to have the label of secretary of the department, it fell to me. So that whole time getting into this new environment and being picked out for reasons that just didn't correspond to my values, respecting somebody for what they were hired for, training them properly before you put them into such a precarious situation. And like I said, I do think that I went into his office to tell him that I wasn't going to do it again, simply because I was so scared and stressed out to do the receptionist's job wrong, to not understand the names, to not know who I was supposed to transfer this to find the name in a big sort of directory, that I thought I just had to release that stress. It was unbearable. And the further we move away from our values for what we feel is the right way of treating people or behaving or whatever, the more triggered we get, the more uncomfortable we get, and those triggers, that discomfort, that anger, that frustration, however it presents itself, is there for a reason, and it is to remind us, okay, your north was over here and you're swaying over there. And it might be because somebody else is acting that way and you don't agree with that, but it's also because you are not following your truth. You're getting sidelined in some way by that. So connect to your value. Remember your values. What are your values? And find that sweet spot where, if you are doing things that are really aligned with your values, if you're in that space of that truth, the interesting thing is that there's like a powerful column of energy that makes you feel so solid, that makes you feel whole, that all of a sudden it's not such a problem to express that, to really just tune into those values and speak from that space without judgment, without frustration, without anger, just from that space of value. And it's almost like nothing can faze you. You're so far away from the triggers because you're so in that space that things just flow. So if you want to download the image, go to my website and find the link to the actual member zone, sign up for free and download the image. And if you do want to buy the whole book, there is a 20% off at the moment and up until the 24th of December. I hope you enjoyed this little moment, and I'll see you next time.